Hey all, we're going to talk about family systems theory, or for short, most people just call it systems theory, and so how uh, to include and incorporate, the family dynamics in counseling sessions and the importance and effects of the family on an individual and on mental health issues and concerns. So, when we talk about family systems theory, we're talking about Murray Bowen. Your book mentions Bowen, and he had a significant impact on uh, family theory, and so if you're interested in systems, then I would certainly suggest that you read some of Bowen's work. I have some information and textbook in my office if anyone's interested. We're also talking about Virginia Satir, um, and her work, and really just if you think about it, every other perspective that we've talked about places emphasis predominantly on the individual. In most of the postmodern cases, we're talking about also the individual and the impact that society and culture has on the individual. But systems, really just sort of looks at how to really comprehend the individual's pain and discomfort and suffering by looking at their systems. So, how does the individual interact with the family, and how does the family interact with the individual? What are rules and norms that keep this dysfunction, discomfort going? Multi-generational dysfunction, multi-generational rules and norms that perpetuate and support uh, upset and discomfort and traumas. Um, and then we'll talk about the concept of homeostasis. So the idea that homeostasis is balance, but homeostasis doesn't necessarily equate to healthy. You can live in really dysfunctional homeostasis in your unit or your system, and that be the norm, and it can be really unhealthy. So you can have just this really unhealthy balance within your family and your unit, that is your norm. So again, when I say balance, I don't necessarily mean healthy balance. The idea is to achieve healthy balance, but all of us, to a varied degree or to varied degrees, have unhealthy or dysfunctional ways of interacting and communicating in our family unit. Some of this it can be so dysfunctional that it obviously warrants uh, exploring, and can be the cause of discomfort and upset, traumas, and mental health issues and concerns. So when we look at systems or systemic theory, we're looking at exploring those rules and processes and ways of behaving and engaging and communicating within that family, as opposed to necessarily looking at identifying symptoms or criteria in an individual to explain a mental health issue or concern. So less of an emphasis on DSM-5. It doesn't mean you won't be diagnosing, but the shift here is to move away from identifying one person as sort of the bad individual. Sorry, and I kind of forgot to move all my slides as I'm talking. So not one person is the cause. The family, the change can't happen if the family system isn't addressed, to include sort of multi-generational patterns of behaving and regulating, that now is causing discomfort in the individual who has come to see you. So again, symptoms. So they're viewed as an expression of a dysfunction within the family. It's not that this person has a problem. It's that this there's a significant amount of dysfunction or discomfort or upset, or dysfunctional balance or homeostasis in this family, that now we're seeing this expression of symptomatology in an individual who's sitting in front of you, or a family that's sitting in front of you. Maybe it's couples counseling. coupling. And when I say couples, I mean couples in the um, a partner, or two partners. It could be two partners, or it could also be um, a mother-daughter, mother-son, father-daughter, father-son. That is not an uncommon presentation of individuals coming in together. When we look at a family, so when we look at the systems approach, genograms are incredibly important. And so in your textbook on page, let me flip to it, sorry. Genograms start on page 411, and then you'll see them again on 412. And so the way that a genogram, uh, the genogram tells a story of your family, and that can go back many, many, many years and many generations. And so it starts off by sort of like, okay, who's coming in to see you? And then you kind of go from there. You go back in history, you go out to the sides of history, and you go down in history. Or sort of present projection. And you're looking at things like who died, who divorced, were there mental health issues in any of those members in your family that you and your client are together identifying by virtue of this genogram. For instance, on 411, you see that they've identified Ralph and John and Mary, and I'm speculating here. Let's see. Let's start with okay. Most family practitioners. Yeah. So they're talking about these three individuals, and these three individuals are siblings here. They're a couple of years apart from each other, it looks like. And then you can see that John and Mary are married, and you can see that they've got some children if you continue on in the next page. And then, going down, then they go into John's parents, and then they go into Mary's parents. So genograms are a really, really important part of this. Genograms are kind of fun to construct, and so there are some websites that you can go to that can help you construct genograms. I would encourage you to do it just on your own and about your own family. Let's see, can it kind of go? So there's Adlerian approach to family therapy, and this is as you would imagine Adlerian to be, that it's much in collaboration and sort of going with the family, not being directive. And so then you've got, then we go into talking about Marie Bowen, and you can see this sort of, the family is viewed as an emotional unit. The individuals are not divorced from one another, and that you have to assess the individual, you have to assess the family in order to figure out what's going on collectively with all of them. He talks a lot about emotional reactivity, so the way that individuals feed off of each other in certain circumstances, where anxiety is being disseminated or distributed in the family, where dysfunction lies and is accepted, and what sort of what propels and escalates dysfunction, if you will. Differentiation of self. So this is a concept that Bowen came up with, and really this describes boundaries. So a psychological separation from others, and we should have healthy differentiation of self. I should know where I begin and where I end in relation to my family members, and that's my nuclear family. That's my my family that I've created by virtue of coupling and having children, and so this is sort of that approach. And am I intertwined or enmeshed with any of my family members? If I were intertwined or enmeshed with any of my biological family, then there's a high likelihood that I would be intertwined and enmeshed in some of my other relationships. And this doesn't necessarily just have to be those types of relationships. This can be work relationships and friendships. And so if you're interested in the concept of boundaries, this is a concept that I find very interesting. Let me know, and maybe we can discuss some ideas about this or thoughts about boundaries and specifically differentiation of self. There are a lot of factors that contribute to not having a healthy differentiation of self. So read up in your textbook about this concept. Triangulation. So it says a third party is recruited to reduce anxiety and stabilize a couple's relationship. This is critical because oftentimes in family counseling or couples counseling, you will be the one that is triangled in. So the counselor will be triangled in to this relationship. And the folks sitting across from you, the couple or the family that you're working with, they have had a lot of experience in recruiting someone else to absorb anxiety or to sort of buffer some of this dysfunction in their relationship. And you may be the person that inadvertently gets triangled in. And so triangulation can be really unhealthy. There's some aspects of triangulation that can be healthy if everyone's sort of on board and doing it together, but the majority of the time when it happens, it's not super healthy, and it's bringing in someone else to help again, sort of offset or absorb or handle or maybe pick sides in couples counseling or in a relationship. And so you do not want to be the person that's triangled in a really unhealthy way. And I've worked with couples who certainly where you sit back and you go, oh no, I just got triangled in, and how do I get myself out? And it's an important thing for a counselor working with families and couples to pick up on. I want to stop right here and just make sure I point out, I haven't really said the marriage, and while we have marriage and family therapists, I want to make sure that I'm passing on to you the concept that marriage is somewhat antiquated in a term to use, because we don't we need to be mindful of not passing a expected judgment of how a couple or a family should look and should conform. And you certainly don't. The concept of marriage certainly has a variety of different lines and definitions, and so we're just more comprehensive and more integrative if we use sort of couples or family that incorporates all versions of what a family may look like. So I want to make sure that I point that out here. But triangulation is tricky, so read up on that in your text. And again, if you're interested in that, let's get in touch with me and let's talk about it. Let's see. Treatment goals. It's to end this consistent pattern that the unit has and has had of engaging and behaving and communicating in a way that's dysfunctional. And so to really change the variety of individuals that exist in this system, not just one individual. And then when you see down, to increase the individual member's level of differentiation. This is when we do talk about the one person. So each individual in that unit needs to have their own sense of self and their own healthy boundaries and their own level of differentiation. So that is when we look at the individual person, but you can't do that without knowing where the individual exists in that family unit and what dysfunction, patterns of dysfunction exist. So we've got Minuchin, and I'm running out of time here for this video, but he explains that sort of the symptoms, the dysfunction in a family is as a result of their family structure really not functioning healthy in a proper way, as defined by their rules and regulations, and that it happens prior to that this change has to happen before anything. Before the individual can get better. So really we're looking, we're kind of pulling back and saying, okay, well, that's great. This individual's got a great deal of behavioral issues and concerns, but we really can't address that until we address the entire family. Make sure I'm going on here. Keep reading up on that.